He was 7, and the rule was simple: never stop performing. But the rule didn't cover what to do when a kid your age stops breathing. The Apollo Theater smelled like cigarette smoke and floor wax, layered over decades of sweat and hairspray and something else, ambition, maybe, or fear. Michael stood on tiptoe to reach the microphone, his patent leather shoes reflecting the stage lights in tiny white stars. The leather pinched his heels. He'd told his mother that morning, but she'd said they'd break in. They hadn't. His brothers flanked him, Jermaine on his left, Jackie and Tito farther back near the drum riser, Marlon bouncing on his heels to Michael's right. The Jackson 5 had been performing for 2 years, but this was different. This was the Apollo. Saturday night. Sold out. 2,300 people packed into seats that creaked and groaned under the weight of expectation and summer heat. The opening bars of their second song hit, and Michael's voice cut through clean and high, effortless in the way only a child's voice can be before self-consciousness sets in. He'd rehearsed this 40 times in the last week. Every step mapped, every breath timed, every hand gesture calibrated to the beat. His father stood at the far edge of the stage, just inside the curtain line, arms crossed, face carved from stone. The rule hung in the air like the spotlight haze, unspoken but absolute: keep going no matter what. Michael hit his mark for the first verse, toes aligned with the strip of white gaffer tape that marked center stage. The crowd clapped on 2 and 4, the rhythm sloppy but enthusiastic. A woman in the third row waved a handkerchief, her face shining with sweat under the house lights. Everything was going exactly right, until it wasn't. But here's the part you can't miss. He saw her during the pre-chorus. Front row, center left, maybe 8 years old, wearing a yellow shirt with a cartoon bird on it. Big Bird, he thought, though the lights made it hard to tell. She was clapping, smiling, leaning forward against the barricade. Her hands moved fast, out of time with the music, but full of energy. Then her hands slowed. Her smile went slack, and her knees buckled. Michael's voice wavered for half a second, a tiny crack in the note that nobody in the audience caught, but that he felt in his chest like a hiccup. His brothers didn't notice. The band didn't notice. The crowd kept clapping, kept swaying, kept living in the moment the way audiences do when they're lost in the music. But Michael's eyes locked on the spot where the girl had been standing. Now she was slumping, her shoulder pressed against the metal rail, her head tilting at an angle that didn't look right. Her ponytail slid to one side. Her mouth hung open. The second verse started. Michael's mouth moved. The lyrics automatic after 40 rehearsals, but his brain was somewhere else. The girl's eyes were half closed, the whites showing more than the irises. A man next to her, middle-aged, glasses, button-down shirt soaked through with sweat, was still clapping, oblivious. The barricade was too high for her to fall over, but too low to hold her upright. She was sinking, wedged between steel and bodies, and nobody around her had noticed yet. The man clapped, the woman behind her clapped. A teenager to her right sang along, off-key but joyful. One look, one breath, one decision. Michael missed his cue for the spin. Jermaine shot him a glance. "What are you doing?" But kept singing his harmony line, smooth and steady. The choreography called for Michael to pivot right and hit a pose. Arms out, chin up. He didn't. He stepped forward instead, off his mark, toward the edge of the stage. The tape was behind him now. He was improvising. His father's posture shifted. Michael could see it in his peripheral vision, the way you sense a storm coming before the first drop of rain. That meant trouble later. That meant a conversation in the car, or worse, in the dressing room with the door closed. But Michael wasn't thinking about later. He was thinking about the girl's head, the way it had dropped forward like a doll's when you let go of the string. The music kept going. Drums, bass, horns. None of them stopped. The groove rolled on, indifferent. Michael took another step. Now he was at the lip of the stage, 3 feet from the barricade, close enough to see individual faces in the crowd. close enough to smell the mix of perfume and body odor, and spilled soda. The girl's yellow shirt was crumpled against the rail. Her arm hung limp, fingers curled loosely, and still nobody in the crowd had reacted. They thought it was part of the show. They thought Michael was engaging with the front row, playing to the audience the way performers do. Some of them cheered. A woman screamed his name. Wait, this gets stranger. He raised his hand. Not a wave, not a gesture from the choreography. A flat palm, pointed toward the wings. The universal signal for stop. The kind of gesture a traffic cop makes, or a referee, or someone who needs the world to pause for just a second. The band didn't stop. Michael turned his head toward the drum kit, toward the drummer, a session guy whose name he didn't know, someone hired for the tour, and raised his hand higher. His voice had gone quiet mid-verse, but the mic was still live, so the arena heard the sudden absence, a gap in the sound where his voice should have been. A few people in the back rows murmured. His brothers kept performing, muscle memory carrying them through the routine. Marlon hit his mark. Jermaine spun. Jackie clapped on beat. But Michael stood there, arm up, staring at someone off stage. The stage manager's voice crackled through the monitor speakers, low enough that only the performers heard it, tinny and urgent. What's he doing? Michael pointed. Not at the audience. At the girl, his finger aimed down, precise, insistent. Then he looked back toward the wings and mouthed two words, exaggerating the shape so anyone watching could read his lips. Help her. 7 years old. No microphone technique for that. No choreography to cover it. No rehearsal that prepared him for the moment when the show stopped being a show and became something else. Just a kid pointing at another kid who wasn't moving anymore. 3 seconds passed. The drummer faltered, his stick hitting the rim instead of the skin, a hollow clack that broke the groove. The horn section kept playing, but the rhythm section was collapsing. Jermaine stopped singing and turned to Michael, confusion flickering across his face, then followed his gaze to the front row. That's when Jermaine saw her too. That's when the performance fractured completely. The stage lights made it hard to see details, washing out color and flattening depth. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The girl's body had gone slack, her weight pressing against the barricade. A woman 2 people down, older, maybe the girl's mother, finally noticed and screamed. Not a performance scream. Not a fan scream. A scream that cut through the music like breaking glass. The sound rippled outward. Heads turned. The crowd's clapping fractured into chaos. The band stopped. The last note hung in the air for a beat, then died. The arena went quiet, except for the rising wave of voices near the front, a murmur that grew louder, sharper, more urgent. Michael's hand was still raised. He didn't lower it. He just stood there, a 7-year-old boy in a red vest and black pants, holding the line between what was and what came next. Notice what happened here, and don't skip this part. Backstage. Someone barked an order. Michael heard the words but couldn't make them out over the rising noise. 2 security guards pushed through the curtain, their radios crackling, and sprinted toward the front row. The house lights came up halfway, flooding the stage in pale yellow that made everything look washed out and unreal. The audience gasped, squinted, murmured. Some stood. Others stayed seated, craning their necks to see what was happening. Michael's father stepped into view at stage left, his face unreadable, not angry, not worried, just blank. But Michael didn't move. He watched the guards reach the girl, watched one of them, a tall man with a shaved head, lift her limp body over the barricade like she weighed nothing. Her head lolled to the side. Her ponytail swung. Her yellow shirt rode up, exposing a strip of pale skin at her waist. The other guard cleared a path through the crowd, shouting something Michael couldn't hear. Her yellow shirt disappeared into the mass of bodies. A medic in a white coat appeared from somewhere near the exit, running with a bag in one hand. The rule said, never stop performing. Michael had stopped. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. 2,300 people staring at a stage where 5 kids stood frozen. Marlon looked like he might cry, his bottom lip trembling. Tito's hand hovered over his guitar strings, unsure whether to play or not. Jackie's eyes darted between Michael and their father, calculating risk, weighing consequences. Jermaine took a step toward Michael, then stopped halfway, caught between solidarity and self-preservation. Michael lowered his hand slowly. His throat felt tight, like something was lodged there. He didn't know if he'd done the right thing. He didn't know if the girl was okay. He didn't know what would happen next. All he knew was that the rule, never stop performing, had just run into something the rule didn't account for. Something bigger. Remember this moment. It matters. A slow clap started somewhere in the balcony. 1 person, then 2, then 10, then 100. The applause built like a wave gathering strength offshore, crashing over the stage, filling the Apollo with sound that wasn't rhythmic or timed. It was raw, human, grateful. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. A man in the 3rd row, wearing a tie loosened at the collar, shouted, "That's a good boy," and the crowd roared its agreement, a sound that shook the walls. Michael's father didn't move. His face was still unreadable, a stone mask. Michael felt a knot in his stomach twist tighter, acid rising in his throat. But then his father gave a single, slow nod, not approval, not praise. Just acknowledgement. A millimeter of movement that said, "I see what you did." The stage manager's voice crackled again, louder this time. "Take it from the bridge. 30 seconds. Get ready." The house lights dimmed. The crowd settled, murmuring, buzzing with energy that felt different now. Not just excitement, but something heavier. The band picked up their instruments. The drummer adjusted his stool. The horn section shuffled sheet music. Jermaine walked over to Michael and squeezed his shoulder. Quick, silent, a gesture that said more than words could. Marlon grinned, nervous but real. Jackie adjusted his mic stand, the metal screeching slightly. Tito hit a chord to check his tuning, the notes bright and clear. Michael took a breath and stepped back to his mark, the white tape under his feet. His hands were shaking. He pressed them against his thighs, hoping nobody saw, waiting for the tremor to stop. The intro to the next song started. A slower tempo, a softer groove, something bluesy, something that gave the audience space to breathe. Michael sang. His voice was steady this time, clear and focused, hitting every note dead center. But something had shifted. The rule was still there, never stop performing, but now it had a crack in it, a fissure. A space where a 7-year-old boy's instinct had slipped through and changed what performing meant. The girl in the yellow shirt didn't come back. Michael scanned the crowd between verses, looking for her. But the spot where she'd been standing was empty now. Just a gap in the front row that nobody had filled. He didn't know if she was breathing. He didn't know if she'd wake up. He just knew he'd done the only thing he could think of in that moment. The song ended. The crowd roared, louder than before, a release of tension that had been building since the silence. The Jackson 5 bowed, waved, exited stage, left through the heavy velvet curtain that smelled like dust and decades. Backstage, the air was thick, humid from the heat, tense from what had just happened. Their father stood by the dressing room door, arms crossed, waiting. Michael expected anger, expected a lecture about professionalism, about not breaking the flow, about how the show must go on no matter what happens in the audience. Instead, his father looked at him for a long moment, 5 seconds that felt like 5 minutes, then said, "Go get cleaned up." That was it. No yelling, no praise, just a dismissal that felt like a door closing softly, instead of slamming shut. Michael didn't know what it meant. He walked past his father into the dressing room, feeling the weight of eyes on his back. Look, this is where it really changes. Michael sat on the dressing room bench, a wooden thing bolted to the wall, his shoes still on, even though his heels were screaming. Jermaine sat next to him and didn't say anything. Sometimes silence was louder than words. Sometimes sitting next to someone was enough. The room smelled like hair oil and old paint. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting shadows that made everyone's faces look gaunt. Marlon paced near the mirror. Tito sat in the corner, guitar across his lap, picking out a quiet melody that nobody recognized. Jackie stood by the door, listening to the muffled sounds of the crowd filing out, voices, footsteps, the groan of old floorboards. A stagehand knocked on the door 20 minutes later. Young guy, maybe 19, wearing a black t-shirt with the Apollo logo on it. "She's okay," he said, breathless like he'd been running, passed out from the heat. "They got fluids in her. She's awake now, asking for her mom." Michael nodded. His chest loosened, just a little. The knot in his stomach unwound halfway. He didn't ask to see her. He didn't ask if she knew what had happened. He just nodded and said, "Okay," his voice small. The stagehand lingered for a second, then said, "You did good, kid," and then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. That night, in the car ride back to the motel, a place with thin walls and a neon sign that buzzed and flickered, nobody talked about it. The radio played low, some station out of New Jersey playing Motown hits. Streetlights flickered past the window, casting moving shadows across Michael's face. He pressed his forehead against the glass, feeling the vibration of the engine through the window, and watched the city blur into streaks of color. Yellow cabs, red brake lights, white headlights. He thought about the girl's yellow shirt, her limp arm, the way the crowd had clapped for him afterward, not because he'd danced or sung perfectly, but because he'd stopped. The rule was still there. Never stop performing. But now Michael knew the rule had edges, places where it bent, places where something else mattered more. He didn't have the words for it yet. He was 7. But the feeling stuck, a small, hard certainty that would stay with him for the rest of his life, growing heavier with each year, each stage, each crowd. The show mattered. The music mattered. But the people in front of him mattered more. Years later, decades, even when interviewers asked him about that night, Michael would smile and say he didn't remember much. Just that it was hot. Just that the crowd was loud. Just that something happened, and he reacted. He never said the girl's name because he never learned it. He never said what his father told him afterward, because his father never told him anything beyond "go get cleaned up." The moment just lived in his memory like a photograph, grainy black and white frozen in time. A moment that defined everything that came after. But the people who were there remembered. They told the story to their kids, who told it to their kids. The night the Jackson 5 played the Apollo, and the youngest one stopped the show to save a girl's life. The night a 7-year-old broke the rule and made a new one. The night everything changed. The Apollo Theater still stands, still smells like cigarette smoke and floor wax, layered over decades of history. The stage still holds the ghosts of 1,000 performances, maybe more. And somewhere in the floorboards, in the air, in the memory of that Saturday night, there's a 12-second silence, where a boy chose compassion over choreography, where the music stopped, and something more important began. Michael stepped off the stage that night, and became something more than a performer. He became someone who knew when to stop. Someone who knew that the spotlight doesn't matter if the people standing in it can't breathe. Someone who understood that the show, no matter how important, was still just a show, and life, real life, happened in the spaces between the notes. The rule said, never stop performing. Michael rewrote it. And from that night forward, every time he stepped on stage, whether at the Apollo or Madison Square Garden, or a stadium in front of 100,000 people, he carried that moment with him. The girl in the yellow shirt, the 12 seconds of silence, the choice that changed everything. Because sometimes the most important thing a performer can do is stop performing and start being human.